Hi everybody, welcome back to my Wargames hobby channel. Alec here. This is a continuation of me reviewing the units that you can use in the Lion Rampant rules. Today I'm going to cover Levy Infantry, a light and heavy infantry. It won't take long to cover Levy Infantry because there's not much to tell you really. Let's read out quickly what it says about them. Levied infantry, in the nicest possible way, are cheap sword fodder, and I recommend buying them only if your warband has an odd point or two left over. If you're looking to engulf your enemy in the fug of an unwashed mess, or if you are a masochist. They don't want to be on the battlefield, and you don't want them either. For warbands where levied infantry were historically of some tactical value, consider representing them as light infantry instead. You have been warned. But levied infantry are not well suited to battle. They arrive on a battlefield armed with agricultural implements, sharpened vegetables and a harsh language, but little in the way of protection. They're generally unenthusiastic but may be capable of holding ground if under little pressure from your enemies. They may also be used, of course, as speed bumps to slow down your opponent's elite cavalry. So they're a unit of 12. They only cost 1 point, and the reason is they're pretty useless, frankly. They move on 6+, they attack on 7+, even more reluctant to attack. They've got a courage of 5, so if they take even a couple of casualties, they're probably going to run away. As I said, they've got an armour of 1. They attack and defend just by hitting with 6s. They've got a movement of 6 inches. I like the special rules. Special rules are smelly. No special rules for this. They just are. And they go back to your farms. You may select no more than 3 levied infantry units in a 24-point warband. Scale up or down proportionately for warbands of different points values. And there are no unit upgrades. The comment here is you still can't polish a turd. So I think that says it all. They're only to be used in desperation. If you've got a point you want to spend, maybe send them to a wood to capture it if there's no one else around. Otherwise, they're going to be pretty useless. So we'll quickly move on to some decent troops. So the next 2 troop types are light infantry and heavy infantry. Let's cover the light infantry first. These are generally poorly armed spearmen, fulfilling a very similar role to heavy infantry, with lower longevity but increased speed. They usually carry shields but lack any body armour, which you'll see in the unit behind, the second unit you're seeing there. They've got no armour at all. They're just dressed in cloth. Unlike heavy infantry, they can use their long spears to form a wall of spears, or in some cases, shield wall. If they were Anglo-Saxons, for example, shield wall would be acceptable. That gives better protection for close combat. If you're in shield wall, you get better defence as well from shooting. Although they lack the staying power of heavy infantry, light infantry are manoeuvrable, therefore well suited to taking objectives and holding them against light opposition. They are vulnerable to missile fire, and which is readily whittle them down from a distance. They may be upgraded to veteran in the same manner as heavy infantry, and they share the option to upgrade to carry javelins, giving them a short-range missile threat of their own. The mixed weapons upgrade allows them to field units combined with spear and bowmen, although they are still outshot by real archers and crossbowmen. So some Dark Age warbands may wish to use the optional shield wall, which I've already mentioned, as described in chapter 3, page 112. So light infantry, let's go through the little box first quickly. They are units of 12 as are heavy. Light infantry costs 3 points. They move on 5+ and attack on 6+. They've got no shooting unless you upgrade them with javelins. They've got a courage of 4, which is reasonable, armour of 2. Their attack value, if they are attacking, is 5+. Their defence value, if they're being attacked, is 4+. So they're better off in defence. They move 8 inches, and as you can see, unless you upgrade them to veteran, they can form wall of spears. So let's look at the special rules. Wall of spears. There need to be at least 6 models to form a wall of spears on a move order. Form the unit into a 2-rank formation based around a central model. A wall of spears cannot form in rough terrain or in cover, and it cannot move in that formation. Wall of spears increases the unit's armbar by 1 point against attacks, but not against shooting. So their armour in melee, instead of being 2, becomes 3, which can be very useful. If an attack ends with both units still in contact and the wall of spears is neither battered or reduced to fewer than 6 models, the enemy must always retreat. An enemy unit will bounce off the wall of spears. If the unit becomes battered, must retreat, or is reduced to fewer than 6 models in a wall of spears, the formation is broken. Now, if you do use the shield wall option, which is really only used in the Viking Age, and if you read what it says on page 112, this is a Viking Age variant of wall of spears. Dark Ages heavy infantry and light infantry can change the classic wall of spears rules for shield wall, shown here. This does not cost any points, but both sides must agree to use shield wall instead of wall of spears for relevant units on both sides before the game begins. Now, for example, if I were using my Saracens, then they never form shield wall. They can form wall of shields, of course. But think of the Anglo-Saxons on Senlac Hill and Battle of Hastings. They did form a very effective shield wall, and the Normans tried very hard to batter them down. They succeeded in the end, but certainly the shield wall held them off for a long time. So a shield wall, there needs to be, again, like wall of shields, at least 6 models in the unit to form shield wall on a move order from the unit to form a 2-rank formation based around central model again. A shield wall cannot form in rough ground and in cover, so exactly the same there. Shield wall units increase their armour by 1 against attacks and shooting. If an attack ends with both units still in contact and the shield wall is neither battered or reduced to fewer than 6 models, the enemy must always retreat. An enemy unit will bounce off the shield wall, effectively. If both units are shield wall and the attack ends with both units still in contact, the attacking unit must retreat. A unit may move while in shield wall, but at no more than half its usual maximum distance. So light infantry normally move 8, will be in a move of 4 inches. Heavy infantry, normally 6, will be able to move at 3 inches, and may not enter rough terrain or gain the benefit of cover in this formation. If the unit becomes battered or reduced to fewer than 6 models from a shield wall, the formation is broken. Using the optional flank and rear rule, it is strongly recommended for shield wall bands, as this makes manoeuvring a bit more challenging and tactical exercise. So when using the flank and rear rule, now we do that at our club. When we use shield wall, they can be outflanked. Wall of spears can't be, but shield wall can. It just makes you, the fact that they can move, they can normally manoeuvre so they don't get outflanked, but you have to be careful of that. But anyway, the rules are for shield wall, if you use that flank and rear option, is units in shield wall can be flanked, unlike wall of spears. When flanked, they do not gain the shield wall armour increase and also suffer the outflanked armour decrease. So, as I've said elsewhere, don't get flanked. So, yep, no excuse. If you get flanked in a shield wall, you're in trouble. Units in shield wall can only move to their front arc, the 180 degrees arc to their front. So no walking backwards, guys. Any other change of direction requires a move action and turning on the spot, pivoting around a central model, so no further movement may be made. And the following restrictions apply. A unit cannot use both wall of spears and shield wall. Units in shield wall may use javelins if equipped with them, which is very handy for light infantry especially. Shield wall light infantry cannot use mixed weapons, Every warrior must carry a spear and a shield. Yeah, so no units that are mixed bow and spear can form a shield wall. And the pike optional wall cannot be used as with shield wall. Well, we're not going to cover that today, but I'll talk about pikes another time. If you come up against a warband, it cannot use shield wall on historical grounds, but does have units with the shield wall special rule. Upgrading all relevant units to your warband to use shield wall will cost you 2 points in total, not per unit. The more shield wall units you field, the more cost effective this becomes in the expense of tactical flexibility. However, I recommend only using shield wall in battles between like for like historical enemies. I totally agree with that. And looking at the design note at the bottom there, it says there's no points for the increase for this rule, as it reflects the dominance of infantry of the Viking Age, allowing for some geographical latitude. Shield wall combat seems to have been prevalent in Britain and Scandinavia more than elsewhere. As an arbitrary cut-off point, I suggest that shield walls are used by Western European warbands between approximately 700 AD and 1100 AD, and wall of spears before and after those dates. Be warned that battles between shield wall warbands may become a grinding scrum, but then so it should be. So there we go. They can be upgraded to veteran, so it's 2 points per unit, but the attack becomes 4+ instead of 5+. The unit may no longer form a wall of spears. So units that are upgraded to veteran, basically they're losing their spears. They become other sort of weapons. They might have halberds and swords and axes and double-handed axes, whatever. But once they're veteran, they can't form wall of spears or shield wall, of course. Javelins, it's a point per unit. They get a range of 6 inches. They roll a 6 plus to see whether they shoot or not, and if they do, they hit on 5s and 6s. Mixed weapons, this is another, again, 2 points a unit. The unit carries a mixture of spears and bows, adding a shoot range of 12 inches, rolling a 6+ to do so, hitting on again 5+. They cannot form wall of spears or shield wall, and cannot be combined with veterans or javelins. So I often have my Saracens often have mixed units or mixed weapons, but I don't really use them for anything else. Now to move on to the heavy infantry, which are the unit in the front there. You can see I've got some Norman heavy infantry that have got mail armour. The heavy infantry are armoured footmen, usually formed with long spears, relying on their numbers and good armour to keep them alive. They know they're less glamorous than elite infantry, which I'll be covering later on another video, but they also know that they're pretty formidable in their own right. They fight better on the defensive. I'm going to come to that a bit more detail later, but as this allows them to draw together into formation and repel attacks, and their long spears will give them an opportunity to form a wall of spear or shield wall. That's tricky to break in close combat. Heavy infantry form a solid backbone for many warbands, being difficult to grind down and able to carry out most orders efficiently. Heavy infantry may be upgraded to veteran, which represents the unit shunning spears for more violent looking weaponry. They're usually two-handed chopping weapons such as bills, halberds and axes, etc., which I mentioned again with light infantry, which improve their offensive capability. So they hit on 4s rather than 5s when they attack. Some heavy infantry can carry javelins, giving them a limited short-range option. This troop type may also be used to represent less armoured footmen or who carry large protective shields. Some Dark Age warbands may wish to use the optional shield wall as described, as we just talked about for the light infantry. So the upgrades are veterans, again, +2, their attack value becomes 4, like the light infantry do, but they cannot then form wall of spears or shield wall. They don't have the spears to do that. They are more aggressive attacking infantry. They can have javelins at just 1 point, the same stats as the light infantry had. And the other thing they could do is they could be bloodthirsty, which costs 3 points, and that's a lot of points. And I haven't seen anyone ever use that yet. I think it's too expensive, frankly. But if they do, whether it's due to superior training, better equipment, or carrying a second weapon, religious fervour, or just a large helping of plain nastiness, a bloodthirsty unit can inflict a whole load of additional pain on an enemy if it rolls well. Any attack dice, but not defense or shooting dice, but any attack dice that roll a 6 cause 2 hits rather than the usual 1. So if you do have bloodthirsty and you roll lots of 6s, yeah, you're going to do a lot of damage. But as I say, at 3 points, that's very expensive. I've never used them as bloodthirsty. I doubt I ever will, and I haven't seen them being used either. So there we go. That's what the book says. Now, the important thing to remember is that, just say you are Anglo-Saxons, you are a very defensive army, because you can see that the stats that they have are much better when they defend. They're not as good in attack. They defend. They always roll 4+ on the dice. So any 4s, 5s and 6s are hits. Whereas if they attack, they only hit on 5s and 6s. That's both the lights and the heavy. So they're better on defence. They're even better if you can form wall of spears or shield wall. And that's because the armour goes up. So the light infantry goes up 2 to 3, and the heavy infantry goes up from 3 to 4. So you can see that in defence, they're a very, very effective unit. And I had a game a little while ago against Anglo-Saxon spear, and they can be really hard to grind down in that defensive mode. So you don't really want to attack with them unless you upgrade to veteran. Then of course you don't get the option to go into shield wall anyway, but it makes you slightly better on attack. But it is an extra 2 points. So you may feel there aren't many units you want to do that with. So most armies will have some light or heavy infantry in their army. Whether they're upgraded or not to have javelins or made veteran is entirely up to you, and also historically what they had anyway. But they are really the quintessential defence troops, holding ground, forming shield wall with their spears, and maybe having javelins as well, so they do have a ranged option, but they can be hard to beat. Right, so there we go. That's the next 3 units I've covered. The next time I do a video, I'll be covering elite infantry and warrior infantry, and I'll try and do that sometime next week. In the meantime, enjoy your wargaming. See you soon.